miss me? Well, your wait for the best in retro-themed arcade entertainment is finally over, as I bring to you my follow-up video in my quest to unearth the coin-operated classics and penny-pinching pains in the arse that once populated the cutting edge of gaming technology, the arcades, and for one reason or another never made the transition to the home market. So join me in looking at the best and worst arcade games that never received home ports, Part 2.
Get 'em.
And we're gonna start this video how we intend to continue, with a bang, as first up is a little known installment in the hallowed franchise of Shoot 'em Up Supreme, R-Type. It is Armed Police Unit Gallop from Irem, a stonking shooter from the genre's golden age. A port was long rumoured for the spiritual home of shoot 'em ups on console, the Sega Saturn, but never materialised. But if, like me, you love these sorts of games with an obsession bordering on the fetishistic like me, then this is one you need to play. Back in the early 90s, every animation and gaming studio seemed to be doing their utmost to get in on the ground level with any hip new self-published or small press comic that they hoped could repeat the success of the Ninja Turtles, with games like Shao Kahn, X-Mutants, Zen the Intergalactic Ninja and Scud the Disposable Assassin coming and going very quickly. Cadillacs and Dinosaurs at least had a short-lived cartoon, but while that tosh is best left forgotten, this 1993 beat-em-up by industry heavyweights Capcom has truly stood the test of time. This, ladies and gentlemen, is WWF WrestleFest. Probably the most famous early wrestling game to feature the roster of colourful and camp combatants of Vince McMahon's sports entertainment empire. Tell 'em about it, Gray! Well, there may have been no shortage of wrestling games doing the rounds, trying to tap into the wrestling boom of the late 80s and early 90s, with the licensed games appearing on NES, Game Boy and later both 16-bits. But WrestleFest, by Technos, the lads of Double Dragon fame, would be considered by many to be the king of the ring as far as wrestling games go. What a rush!
I'm Batman.
Batman games based on the 1989 blockbuster which made Batman cool again were like a clitoris. Every cunt had one, whether it was on Commodore 64, Spectrum, Amiga to NES, Mega Drive and even PC Engine. But how many of you knew that there was an original arcade game by Atari? And now that you do know, I want you to forget I said anything. It may not be the worst game I played in the making of this video, as I played Tattoo Assassins, but it could and should have been so much more.
Wait till they get a load of me.
And we go from a game that failed to perform when the pressure was on to a 2D shoot 'em up Stallion from the Irem stable, who, not content with transforming the shoot 'em up landscape for decades to come, would turn their considerable talents to the run and gun genre, in a game that, along with In the Hunt, would sire Metal Slug. but Gunforce 2, known as Geostorm in Japan, isn't yet ready to be put out to pasture, as Shoot 'em Ups Go, it still packs enough playability and firepower to satisfy your needs.
Aliens.
The bitch is back, and she's brought her brood with her, so get tooled up and prepare to clear out LV-426 once and for all, in a liberty-taking adaptation of the James Cameron sci-fi action classic, brought to us by pound for pound arcade kings Konami. Now, unlike Capcom's Alien vs Predator, I was very surprised that this never came to console, as an Aliens toy line followed soon after it. But if you can't get enough face-hugging and chest-bursting action, then fire up an emulator and play what is for me one of the best games from the franchise.
He is called Bega, last of the Earth Warriors.
Well, I couldn't put it off forever, could I? This is the best and worst I'm looking at after all. And I know it didn't sound like it, but I did actually like Atari's Batman. Now, it's time to delve into the swamp and dredge up a title from the teething phase of gaming, its short-lived obsession with Laserdisc technology, which supplied awesome animation, it has to be said, which must have grabbed attentions back in 1983, but when the game itself is little more than a shitty Space Invaders clone, this is one game that, along with its entire genre, will not be missed.
Let's get in. Get rid of him.
Course, like London buses round here, you wait forever for one, then two show up together. Yes, readers, it's time to turn our attention to one of the hottest genres of the mid to late 80s, the scrolling beat-em-up, popularised by hits like Double Dragon, and then sullied by tripe like Downtown. An overhead beat-em-up similar to Smash TV, but that's where the similarity ends. Awful controls, awful music, awful gameplay, just awful. Full stop, end of sentence. Avoid. It's Irem again, so you know what that means. And okay, maybe I will marry R-Type, but having looked at the extended family and armed police gallop, it's time to turn towards the main branch of the family tree in R-Type Leo. A lighter in tone installment, it has to be said, but is none the worse for it, because even running at 50% of its potential, it still leaves its competition in the space dust. Great game. Incredibly, we've reached the halfway point of the video, and this is the first Sega game to make the list. An oversight on my part, for which I will commit ritual seppuku for immediately after this video. But first, let's have a butcher's at an Persian-themed beat-em-up, pushing Sega's sprite scaling know-how to its limit. It's Arabian Fight, which apparently is part of the Story of Thor, aka Legend of Oasis universe. A port was mooted for the Mega CD, I remember, but the machine's sluggish sales shelved the idea. Worth checking out though. Developed by Video Systems, a Japanese studio of some renown in shoot-em-up circles, as they produced titles like Aero Fighters and Sonic Wings. Tao Taido here was their first and only foray into the one-on-one fighting game market. And good thing too, as Tao Taido would become the whipping boy in the beat-em-up craze sweeping the arcades in the early 90s. Uninspired, unoriginal, and just plain naff. Stick to your shoot-em-up strengths, Video System, before you embarrass yourself further. we drop down a few levels in the greatest shoot 'em up of all time category and look at a title from IREM's B Team. Or maybe the lads on Work Experience. But despite its bare bones graphics and gameplay, has managed to hold my interest recently. Won't make a shoot 'em up fan out of any of you non-believers, but you could do a whole lot worse than this one.
When the moon is full and trees are bare, walk through the cemetery if you dare, where skeletons rot and corpses fester. Locate the tomb with the skull of a jester. Feed him the token all shiny and new. It is then that Carnival will return for you.
And for number 13 on this list, I had to include something from the growing horror genre. So here's Carnival, a House of the Dead style rail shooter that likes to think it's controversial and channeling the previous decade's video nasty vibe, when in truth it's more like an episode of the Groovy Ghoulies. Fun for a bit, but the novelty wears off very quickly.
Time to clean it up.
So next up, let's look at how horror should be handled, courtesy of Data East. This is Night Slashers, a Splatterhouse-inspired scrolling beat-em-up with tongue firmly in cheek, as you batter zombie hordes across multiple stages of gore-soaked splendour. Gets repetitive in one player, but if you can twist someone's arm to play it with you, then it's a laugh. And in these depressing times, that's exactly what we need. I honestly couldn't tell you why Konami went through a phase of turning almost every short-lived Saturday morning cartoon into an arcade game whose quality far exceeded its source material. But this is Wild West Cowboys of Moo Mesa. And what's it all about then? Well, I've not got a Scooby-Doo, mate. It's as if the Marshal's horse from Bravestar was made the main protagonist. But all you really need to know is, at this game's core, is it's a cutesy Contra clone from Konami. Nuff said. What's that? Some of you are quite intrigued and actually wouldn't mind trying the last couple of games I've shown. Well, here's a game I found behind the septic tank that'll soon put a stop to that. This is, and excuse me while I take a pause so I can say the fucking title with a straight face, Guardians of the Hood, a shitey Mortal Kombat / Pit Fighter wannabe of all things, which probably looks like a laugh when you're watching it, but most certainly not when you're playing the fucking thing. If you gave me a straight choice between playing this game again or waving my wedding tackle in the faces of a pack of hungry Rottweilers, I'd baste my cock in Win-A-Lot and shout Din Din's Fido without a second thought. Fuck this game. In the last video I uploaded on my channel, I looked at Golden Axe Warrior, a role-playing game for the Master System that was little more than a blatant plagiarising of Legend of Zelda. And in case you thought that was simply a slip-up by Sega and they wouldn't be stupid enough to rip off other high-profile games in the future, well, here's them up to their old tricks again, this time with Capcom's Mercs. But Mercs was average at best. Does that mean Sega improved the formula and made a better game, and somehow managed to one-up Capcom and show them how shoot-em-ups should be done? Nope. Next. You know, I've been playing retro games since they were considered current gen, but even I'm constantly surprised at how many times a corker of a game I've never heard of gets its claws into me and I can't stop playing it, because that's what's happened since I tried this one for the first time while making this video. This is Violent Storm, a generic sounding, and if I'm honest, generic looking scrolling beat 'em up that has no right to be as good as it is. It's incredible. Big, well-defined sprites, a kick-ass soundtrack, and gameplay so sharp you could shave with it. I implore you, check this one out. The difference between this and Guardians of the Hood is like night and day. And as we come to the final few titles I'm going to be looking at, hard decisions have to be made, but I really wanted to show off this above average film tie-in platformer from Capcom, as I liked the movie as a kid. I've heard it was a flop in the States, but I remember it was pretty big on this side of the pond, and as much as I liked the 8-bit NES adventure, the arcade game is a simplistic but charming platformer that's aged far better than the film it was based on. And the final game I'm going to be looking at is also the end of an era of sorts, as it would be the final scrolling beat 'em up Konami would produce. With the industry changing and everyone switching to 3D games with the launch of the PlayStation and the 32-bit era. But I find it ironic that in 2020, 2D games are alive and well on the indie scene, and even Sega recently released Streets of Rage 4 to an appreciative fanfare. But whatever the future holds, great games, like great cinema, will remain both timeless and relevant. And Metaphoric Force, despite its daft name, is as good a beat 'em up now as it was when first released at the end of 1993. That's the very definition of a classic. Well, what a journey we've just been on, traversing the well-trodden path of gaming's past. I hope you all suitably entertained and in the process maybe learned something. I know I certainly did. So this has been my best and worst arcade games that never received home ports, part 2. Links to part 1 and other videos should be on screen, so thank you for joining me. Be sure to share this video and subscribe, and I'll be back before you know it with more retro delights. So until then, thank you again for watching, and goodbye.